Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our another Lunch and Learn for the year. I'm Helen, for those that don't know me, and we've got Lisa here and Baxter, and also Georgia is online as well. So we're very excited about all our Lunch and Learns because the topics are so varied, and I know that you're all taking bits and pieces away, and of course the recordings will go to you at the end, and the contact details as well. So today our Lunch and Learn is brought to us by Gow Gates Insurance Brokers, and Gow Gates is now a platinum partner of the FCA. So they've given us all full support in all our insurance needs. But today, in particular, we're talking about risk management and workers' compensation, which is quite specific. We've got Natalia, who's the portfolio manager of Gow Gates, and next to her is Trevor, he's head of workers' compensation, and he is an expert in workers' compensation. So over to you, Natalia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Lunch and Learn. Thanks, FCA, for facilitating this session. And just a quick introduction about myself. I'm from Gow Gates Insurance Brokers, and we are the Platinum partners of FCA. And I've been working in risk management and insurance for about 20 years now. And it's a pleasure to be here with you all and be working with you. Now, let's dive into our topic, risk management, which is such a big subject, and we could spend hours talking about it and all the risks in the business. But because we have just 30 minutes, I thought I would focus on something specific, a risk that your business could have, which is the people. So risk management and workers' compensation are the key to ensure a safe and sustainable workplace. So for this reason, we have Trevor Preach here today, our head of workplace solution and workers' compensation here at Gow Gates, and he'll be sharing with you all the details about workplace solutions and the risk and how to manage it. So I'll pass it on to Trevor. Thanks, Trevor, and he'll talk a little bit about Gow Gates and our vast experience in the market as well in workplace solution.
Thanks, Natalia, and thanks, Helen and team. We really appreciate the time to talk, and thanks everyone for jumping online and all the note takers out there. Really appreciate your time. Today we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into workers' compensation. As Natalia alluded to, workers' compensation really equates to risk management and is the line of insurance which is most heavily aligned with risk management. Claims costs impact the premium, and the premium is so very sensitive to claims costs. So we're going to talk a little bit about, I'll provide an update on workers' compensation generally, nationally. I'll also do a New South Wales case study or example of how intricate the workers' compensation landscape is. I'll provide an update on national premium rates, what's happening state by state, and then I'll end the session by providing a little bit of a practical toolkit on what you guys can look at to reduce your premium and mitigate your exposure. Lastly, just one little housekeeping piece. For any questions, please feel free to raise your hand along the way. I'm happy to deal with questions as we go. Anything I'm unable to get to or capture, there's some time left at the end, so I can try to respond as we go, if not right at the end of the session. Thank you. So let's jump in. The wonderful world of workers' comp. Now, how does it work? So workers' comp is a compulsory insurance nationally. Now, not everyone can set up workers' comp. It's not designed for every individual, but it's essentially set up for businesses who employ staff. Now, very complex workers' comp can be. Every jurisdiction is different unless you are a government entity or a competitor to a government entity, whereby you can set up under a national scheme called Comcare. Otherwise, workers' compensation is unique in every state. I guess the one common factor is that, again, it is compulsory as long as you're an employing entity with staff. If you're a sole trader, which some of you may or may not be, then you're actually unable to obtain workers' compensation. You must look at alternatives if you want to cover yourself for any injuries. Often that's in the form of life insurance or what's called personal accident insurance, which is a form of general insurance. Additionally to that, volunteers are not covered. Only actual employees who earn a salary or a wage can be covered by workers' comp. There are some minor exceptions to that, state by state, but generally, if you've got volunteers, those volunteers will not be covered by your workers' comp policy. Important to note. Contractors. Now this is a big question that comes up with a lot of our existing clients who use contractors. Are those contractors covered under my workers' comp policy or not? The question is often case by case as to how that's answered. So some contractors can be deemed employees, and there are online tests state by state to determine whether your contractors are deemed workers and therefore covered by your workers' comp policy, or whether they're actually true contractors and they need to look at their own cover. Generally, the answer is if they predominantly work for your business as a contractor and they use your tools, your branding, your equipment, there's a good chance that that contractor might actually be a deemed employee and be covered by your workers' comp policy. As I mentioned earlier, workers' compensation is compulsory, and each state has its own sort of penalty system, but generally penalties do apply if you're an employing entity and you do not have workers' comp cover. Generally, premiums are determined based on sort of 3 factors, depending on your size and, again, depending on the jurisdiction that you're in. Each state operates slightly different, but generally speaking, workers' compensation premium is determined by your annual wage roll multiplied by an industry rate, whether it's retail, whether it's construction, whatever that might look like. Each industry has its own unique rates applied. And then the final factor will be your claims history. Most jurisdictions look at the last 3 years of your claims history to determine what your premium is for the coming year. Now, what does workers' compensation actually cover for your workers who are injured? Now, again, state by state, each one's different, but generally speaking, lost wages are covered. Medical expenses, whether that's a surgery, whether that's physio or an x-ray, for example, that those costs will be covered by the policy. Rehab expenses. Many jurisdictions offer lump sum payments for workers who are permanently injured or catastrophically injured, and legal fees are covered by your policies. In most jurisdictions, employers have an obligation to fulfill certain tasks. One of those main tasks is to develop what's called a return to work program. So this is, I guess, a policy or a procedure, depending on the size of your organisation, that you must have in place and be able to demonstrate that your workers have access to, which I guess shows sort of step by step how you would manage getting an injured person back into the workplace. There is often also an obligation, certainly in the larger jurisdictions, to offer suitable duties for a certain amount of time. So in New South Wales, you must offer suitable duties to an injured person for up to 6 months. In other states, it's 12 months, for example. Very high level overview of how workers' compensation works nationally. Now, what are some observations? A bit of a market update on workers' comp. And this is certainly not everything that's happening in the world, but some high level. So regulators in a lot of the larger government-run states are, I guess you'd call it, running through an audit process at the moment. So New South Wales and Victoria specifically have bolstered their regulatory engagement in recent years. Privacy and injured worker consent is big on the agenda in all jurisdictions. So that's a big focus for brokers, employers, and insurers to make sure that privacy is of a hot topic. Now, New South Wales, the auditors and the regulators are focusing on the return to work programs that I mentioned before. So a lot of small employers have a minor obligation in this space. As a company becomes larger and larger, the regulators essentially will put you on a list and conduct regular audits to make sure that your return to work program is best practice. The other big focus in New South Wales is making sure that injury claims are lodged within an appropriate amount of time. Technically, in New South Wales, an injury must be lodged to your insurer within 48 hours of you becoming aware of that injury. Victoria, I know we've got a lot of members today who are based in Victoria. Return to work plans, so the specific return to work plans that your injured workers must have are being audited, and there's a prescribed framework for those return to work plans. Suitable duties, the fact that you are offering suitable duties is an audit piece, and stakeholder contacts, so making sure that you are making contact with your injured person, the insurer, rehab providers, etc. Is a big audit piece. In terms of the injury demographic that we're seeing at the moment, this hasn't changed over the years. Manual handling is still the top injury cause or the mechanism for an injury, by far and away the most common. We're seeing a lot of back, shoulder and claim injuries. Again, nothing new, and we don't sort of see that changing over the years. But I guess what has changed in particularly in recent years is the count of mental health or psychological injuries that are compensable. So I've just got a few facts up there on the slide. The number of compensable psychological claims coming through has doubled in the last 6 years. I must say these are New South Wales statistics, but these trends are being seen nationwide, absolutely. So in New South Wales, at the moment, the count or the frequency of these types of claims accounts for 12% of the overall portfolio, but 38% of the costs. So these claims really are driving premium increases, and changes in this space has been foreshadowed, particularly by the New South Wales government. As I mentioned there, the claims are set to double and the costs triple by 2030 if new legislation and practices are not brought into place by the insurer. What we'll move to is the next slide where we'll talk about premiums. So I guess what has this increase done to the premiums across the country? And thanks to Finity, the actuarial company who put these stats together on a yearly basis. Look, we don't have the 25 to 26 figures, they're still being worked, but this will at least give you an indication of what the average premium rates are doing to your premiums and have done over the years since 2019. So I'll just quickly go through this and I'll sort of spell out the high points here. What we're looking at on the left, New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, South Australia. So these are the government-run states. If you do have policies in these jurisdictions, the government actually sets the premium rate, manages the premium, invoices you, and generally those claims are managed by outsourced TPAs. So it might be EML, Allianz, QBE, that they're actually engaged by the government to manage those claims on behalf of the government. The insurers on the right, WA, Tasmania, ACT, Northern Territory, sorry, the jurisdictions on the right. These states are run by privately underwritten insurers. So that's where your Allianz, QBE, GIO, those insurers actually underwrite the premium. They set the rates themselves. It's a competitive market in that regard. And the government acts as a regulatory body to make sure that those insurers are, I guess, playing nicely with regards to your premium. Now, what we've seen, you'll see sort of a stark contrast over the years of what's happened with regards to the average premium rate, privately underwritten compared to government. What we've seen with the government states in recent years is sort of a sharp uptick in premium rates, particularly New South Wales, Victoria, you'll see there, but even to a lesser extent, South Australia and Queensland, where premiums have risen over the years, largely off the back of those mental health claims I spoke about on the previous slide. In the privately underwritten states, we've almost seen the opposite, where we've seen reductions in premium rates over the years, particularly you'll note in ACT and Tasmania. There's an argument there that in the privately underwritten states, the premium rates were too high, that the insurers were shooting for massive premiums previously, and there's sort of a natural correction that's happening. There's also an argument that those privately underwritten states are just doing a better job of containing those mental health claims. There's a few arguments out there, but certainly what we're seeing are increases in the big government states and moderation in the smaller states. I wanted just to step through New South Wales just as a bit of a case study, I guess, to show everyone how complex workers' compensation is. And this is only one state as an example. Workers' compensation really can need some demystification, and oftentimes you can sort of get lost in all the detail. So New South Wales, it is a government-run state. So iCare, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of iCare and have to deal with iCare. They are the government entity that manages workers' compensation. Now they outsource the claims management to, it was 6, now it's 5 agents. So EML, Allianz, GIO, QBE, and Gallagher Bassett. There's it's becoming what I would call a fairly fair spread of market share, although traditionally EML have dominated this space. There's also a number of specialised insurers available in New South Wales. Now that's outside of the iCare arena, and these insurers have licences to trade directly with CIRA, the regulator. So if you're in any of these sorts of industries, particularly I would note would be hospitality industry insurance, so HII, could be one accessible to a lot of members on the call today. So you're able to get a competitive premium offer from these insurers, and you can actually compare what you would get there with what you would get through iCare. And often you can get a better result through a specialised insurer, depending on your claims history, of course. But these specialised insurers are set up for certain industries and certain industries only. If you are in any of these industries, I would encourage you to reach out to us or explore these options yourself. There are also, for larger employers, there are also alternative premium financing options available. So alternative premium models are available for large employers. Now, what's large? Some of you might say the way that the structure is set up in New South Wales is if you pay a premium of over $500,000 a year, you have access to an alternative model called the LPR model, or the Loss Prevention and Recovery model. Now, there is more risk associated with that model, but there's also a potential reward if you manage your safety and claims management really, really well. There is also what's called LPR Plus, which is for the very, very large end of town, $3 million premium and more per year. You can get access to this, again, an alternative model, again, more risk if things go pear-shaped, and more reward on the table if you manage your program really well. Outside of these sorts of options, in New South Wales, self-insurance is always an option depending on your size. Now, what impacts your premium? If you're in the conventional premium model, so I'm not talking about self-insurance or the LPR model I alluded to before, in New South Wales, not all claims costs will impact your premium. So this is very important to know, and a lot of employees out there operating are actually just unaware of this. And you might think that all the costs that you carry in regards to a claim impacts your premium at the end of the day, and it's not true in New South Wales. So in New South Wales, there are essentially only 3 types of costs that will drive your premium, and all the other types of costs are complementary. So those being lost wages. So if you've got an injured worker who is missing time from work because of that workplace injury, and you're being reimbursed by the insurer, or the worker is being paid directly by the insurer, then those costs are premium sensitive and will drive up your premium severely. The other 2 payments are lump sum payments. So this is for the permanently impaired or catastrophically injured workers I spoke about earlier. Those costs are premium impacting. In New South Wales, under the conventional model, all other costs are not premium sensitive. So thereby rehab expenses, medical expenses, legal costs, etc., etc. They're all complementary on your policy. I mentioned before about what goes into the premium, but just to recap, your industry classification rates, which varies depending on what you do as a company, your annual wage roll, and the last 3 years of your claims history, all combined, and that equates to your premium. So how do we reduce your premium? Obviously, this is something that every organisation is interested in, and there are practical steps you can take, which I'll sort of talk to over the next few minutes. So implementing the best possible agent or insurer claims management team. So what does this mean? A lot of employers are unaware that you actually have options, whether it's New South Wales, Victoria, and most of the other jurisdictions, bar Queensland and South Australia. You have options. You can move. If you're not happy with the service that you're being given by your current insurer or outsourced claim agent, you can actually shop around and you can look for the best possible team. Certainly recommend, if you've got a broker or if you want to chat to us, get our view or get your current broker's view on who is the best performing team out there in each jurisdiction, and you can be guided through that process, but you don't have to put up with poor service if you are receiving poor service. So professional and active management of workers' compensation claims, sort of what I spoke about earlier, but also, I guess, engaging experts if you don't have the internal resources to manage claims. Again, if you're operating in New South Wales, a lot of those services can be engaged and accessed for free on your policy. Important to note. Implementation of early intervention programs. Really, this is the key to workers' compensation, is acting early, calling your injured worker early, engaging the insurer early. Numerous studies have been conducted which all prove that the earlier you act, the better the outcome in the long term. Safety and risk management goes without saying. The safer your workplace, the less harm you'll have. Improved insurer, healthcare and rehabilitation provider collaboration. If you do have regular claims, making sure that you have good relationships with the myriad of third parties that will be involved in that recovery process. Premium mitigation and relief strategies. So earlier on, I spoke about the agents or the insurers. Now, if your claims have been mismanaged by your agent, your case manager, or your insurer, premium relief is always on the table. So if there is evidence that those claims were not managed in line with best practice or the insurer's guidelines, we can always make a submission to the regulator to have your premium reduced. Looking at alternative premium models. This isn't available to everyone, particularly if you're a small or medium employer, but for large employers, you have, or if you're in those industry classifications I mentioned earlier, where you've got access to a specialised insurer, there are options there. So always encourage you to explore those options or reach out to a broker to get some advice in that space. And needless to say, active claims management and return to work support for your workers will always yield results. So what is best practice return to work or case management? So I've just noted a few which over the years I've found can be beneficial to focus on. Some of it is obvious, so clear communication and timely decisions. My recommendation is if you're dealing with an insurer directly, or if you're dealing with a broker or any third party, make sure that you get timeframes for everything. Often third parties and insurers will get busy and they've got a lot of claims that they're trying to manage. So making sure that you've got a time frame for their particularly liability decisions to be made is critical, and holding them to account. Escalate quickly if you've got an issue with a new injury that's come about, if you have reservations or if maybe you don't believe that it's 100% genuine, raise those concerns initially. Otherwise, often you lose the opportunity to challenge claims if you don't do it within the first 7 days of that claim being lodged. Challenge non-compliant or unreasonable decisions. Naturally, often that's a big part of what we do here as brokers, is we're able to identify a decision that an insurer's made may not be appropriate, and we challenge those decisions using our experience. Regularly, if you've got a number of open claims at any given time, make sure that you're regularly reviewing those, setting action plans, addressing any roadblocks, all of those things, make sure that you're reviewing those regularly. If you've got concerns with liability or a capacity for work, we believe someone has a capacity for work, but maybe that's not being reflected on the medical certificate, make sure we engage experts to look at that. So that's when I'm referring to independent medical examinations. Those are specialists and GPs who we engage directly to look at a worker's capacity and look at liability for the claim. Support injured workers naturally. You know, what we often in workers' compensation neglects the basics in this space. So contacting the worker regularly once a week, showing genuine care, providing a single point of contact for any issues that worker might be feeling on their journey back to the workplace. Leveraging data, particularly if you have a high transaction of claims, looking at the data, managing it, identifying trends so that you can make improvements to your business, and focusing on early intervention, as I mentioned before, is really the primary objective in getting someone back to work. I think we're running a little bit short of time, so I'll skip through this. This really just highlights the importance of early engagement and how you will see better results getting people back to work the earlier you act. And lastly, Gow Gates and the FCA. So we're so pleased to be a Diamond member and part of the journey that everyone's on. We recognise that franchising is a major force in Australia now. While insurance solutions do exist, we feel they have been fragmented in the past and perhaps inconsistent when aimed at your sector. The rapid growth in franchising, really hasn't been matched by insurance products, solutions, and as I mentioned there, a structured support network. Really, our aim is to work on that, and create greater harmony, clearer objectives across your sector. We feel solidifying the sector, getting everyone on board will really yield sustainable solutions and better long-term outcomes for everyone on this call and in the sector generally. So we're really looking forward to this partnership and working with everyone. Are there any questions?
That was lots of information. I found the average premium rates quite interesting, government versus private, and both sides of the scale, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I can elaborate on that a little bit, Helen. So, and I know a lot of our members are in Victoria and New South Wales. So Victoria has definitely been an interesting case study in terms of what the government's done with the premium. So we saw essentially a flat premium rate for many, many years. As far back as I can remember, the government down in Victoria would not change the average premium rate. So every industry would change, obviously up and down depending on actuarial statistics, but at the end of the day, the government had set the average premium rate across the whole jurisdiction to be the same year on year on year. What happened eventually is, and largely off the back of mental health claims, was the government realised that they were in an enormous deficit, and the only way to climb out of that deficit was to do one of two things, or two of two things. So you either restrict workers' entitlements, so reduce the claims costs that are going out to injured workers, or you charge more premium to employers. So, yeah, back in 2023, they decided to do the latter, and they almost doubled their average, not doubled, sorry, that they increased the average premium rate dramatically. So it basically increased to a point where it was unsustainable for a lot of small companies, and I'm sure a lot of you lived through that a few years back. And then they've frozen that premium rate again. Now, the year after they made those changes to the premium, they also restricted workers' benefits, and they brought in changes to mental health claims and others. So we have seen wholesale changes in Victoria in recent years. Sorry, Helen, I went off on a tangent there, perhaps.
No, that's all right. Well, I'm a Victorian, so not so good news. I have got a question. You mentioned that the workers' compensation claims are on the rise, in particular with mental health and psychological. Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, really good question, Helen. So I guess it kind of depends on, and I've mentioned this a few times, depend on each state. Really, the advice is make sure, particularly with claims that are coming out from a bullying and harassment type mechanism, or a performance management sort of mechanism of injury. Really, it's about keeping clear and documented records of meetings that you've had and conversations that you've had with those persons. You can't be too careful when you're having those sorts of conversations with workers. We see it all the time, unfortunately, here at Gow Gates, where it could be a perfectly reasonable response to these sorts of allegations, but because your response wasn't documented, that's where the claim would fall over and it would be accepted. So I guess that's just one very, very generic sort of piece of advice. In New South Wales specifically, there is legislative reforms on foot. So back in May this year, the Labor government introduced proposed legislative reforms to really tighten the eligibility of mental health claims, so to make it more difficult for workers to get access to workers' comp if they were suffering from a mental health claim. And that's currently going through the upper house. There's been multiple parliamentary inquiries, etc. But we expect next year for that legislation to be in place, and for a lot of mental health claims to no longer be compensable. So it will be a different world. I guess all I could recommend on this call would be to try to stay across that if you can. There's a lot of media about it, and try to prepare your business as best as possible for what that space looks like, because there'll be flow-on effects in regards to safety and industrial relations, no doubt.
Good advice. Yes, good advice. Thank you. Any other questions from anyone? You can pop your hand up or just take yourself off mute.
Everyone's quiet.
No other questions? Silence means you covered a lot.
You did a good job.
Take that as a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, if you don't want to ask questions now, then you saw Trevor's details up on the screen earlier. But more importantly, when I send you the recording, I will send Natalia's details and Trevor's, and please feel free to contact them with any questions. Even if it's not specifically risk management, if you've got other insurance questions, Natalia will be more than happy to answer those as well. So no more questions? Yes, Gow Gates will also be at NFC this October. So they have a session on that. So put that down in your diaries. Has everyone got their tickets to NFC? While I'm asking on that note, if you haven't, click through, bring the team and be a part of NFC, October 19 to 21. And thank you very much, Natalia and Trevor, for being here today. Really
Thank you.
Very good. Important information. So, Georgia, our next Lunch and Learn is coming up. Tuesday, 17 September, we have Fran Connect. They're going to talk about consolidated systems and operational digitisation. So looking forward to that. I'll see you all online. From Helen, Baxter, Lisa and Georgia.
Signing off.
Signing off. See you later.
Have a great
See
day.
you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.